It's that time of the year where we kind of want to know what's going on around the NFC South. So we dive into some headlines, Bucks, Panthers, Falcons. We're also going to rank these teams this year, which I think we all kind of agreed that we're in the same place, but it could change depending on one young quarterback that could just mess it all up. And also, who is on the fence for training camp? We get into all of that in today's show.
Those battles are going to start playing out, and we are going to have the coverage of them every single day on NewOrleans.Football. Make sure you sign up for the site. Camp23 is the code, 20% off your first payment. We got an app coming out. We got a live updates feature coming very, very soon. So all of our coverage is going up, and that's going to be practices pretty soon. So we are always presented by PJ's Coffee, and we're coming to you from the Better Call BADEAUX podcast studio. And if you need to buy a new car or just want a new car or you want to treat yourself to something special, go check out our guy, Matt Bowers. He has car dealerships all over the Gulf Coast. There is not a better car dealer anywhere to be found. They will take care of you. They will get you the best prices, and they will make sure to get you in the vehicle of your dreams. I vouch for everything Matt does at those dealerships, so make sure you go check them out. And drive one of his cars to a PJ's location. They are all over the place. You don't ever have to look very far to find one. They got the best coffee, as we said, locations all over the city. So get there and start your day with them and maybe play our podcast alongside while you're sipping your coffee. And if you need legal help with any of the following: car wrecks, offshore injuries, 18-wheeler collisions, Maritime Jones Act, hurricane and storm claims, you better call BADEAUX at 504-323-7777 or 985-303-7777 for your free consultation and case review. And check out Hardhide Ponchatoula Strawberry Whiskey. That is an 86 proof blend of aged wheat bourbon, American light whiskey, and fresh Ponchatoula strawberries blended in New Orleans. It is not for the thin skin. Look for it in your favorite stores, bars, and restaurants. And get to an Ideal Market, home of the freshest produce in the city. They do a great job in the community. They received a Peter J. Larkin Award from the National Grocers Association for outstanding community support. They always bring the best quality food products at the best prices. They are the home of the largest variety of Hispanic and international foods you will find in the state. A hot deli that surpasses many restaurants in the flavor of their authentic Hispanic dishes, and also the best place to cash checks, wire money, pay bills. They have a complete customer service department like no other. And check out Firehouse Subs, Veteran Boulevard location. Great people doing great things for the community. All right, let's get into the show.
Since the running backs are in the headlines, let's go ahead and bring it back to CJ Spiller. After Nick added this nice little prop, we'll pick it up and show you guys. Yeah, give us the history for people that don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of just like a memorial for my friend Evan Silva. He was just really on me for Saints advice. And I think between me and him, we single-handedly inflated CJ Spiller's draft stock in fantasy football by probably a good 5 or 6 rounds. And there's probably nothing that I have ever been more wrong about. Wrong player, right idea. They badly needed the satellite back that season. They went out, they got CJ Spiller. The idea was that getting him out of Chan Gailey's offense and getting him back into a more creative role, which kind of sounds like some of the stuff we're talking about with Alvin Kamara right now, would just get him back to a place to where he was playing it at all pro level. And it never happened. Injuries, all this stuff never happened. Probably my favorite interview of all time, though, he was coming back on Halloween. He said, "Spiller, thriller, trick or treat coming at you." And it was like the strongest quote of all time. And look, he had the 80-yard wheel route against the Cowboys, and that's it. But it was a good moment. It was a good moment.
It's the perfect symbol, mascot. I mean, there couldn't be a better, like, for me and you. I was on that same bandwagon with you. I mean, he was the perfect fit, the perfect style running back. We got him in a nice little discount too that year, and we found out why.
How do we feel about the running back discourse overall? The conversation that's going on right now, where the running backs feel like they're undervalued, they're not being paid what they should be paid, that people are kind of taking them for granted a little bit. Where's everybody falling that?
It's unavoidable because it's just too much for reality. I mean, we've said it a million times. We said it leading up to the draft. You've said it a million times. That's smart business to draft a running back and recycle them out after 4 or 5 years. We've just seen it too many times that they get a little older and they start to wear down. Some guys are still effective in their 30s, but that's not the time to start paying them 3 years guaranteed, $20 million a year. It's just really unfortunate. And actually, I was just talking to a friend. I workshopped this tweet and ultimately didn't send it out, but this is the perfect format for it because I can explain it. It was a half joke, but you just mentioned fantasy. Like, I almost think for them to be properly valued, because they're still the driving stars of this league in a lot of ways in special fantasy. Maybe the NFL and NFLPA should create some sort of bonus performance pool, like the performance-based pay from fantasy revenues that can get them paid properly, because the teams that's not going to change. Teams are not going to invest more money in them, but maybe they deserve some of that fantasy pie because they're the driving force of fantasy. They're still the stars of the league, but I get why they're not getting paid.
I think too, what we're seeing is typically, like, this is where people have fallen off the cliff or have tapered off. You have some elite running backs that are kind of just generational talent. Derrick Henry, Tony Pollard, of course, was the one that with the Cowboys that was the big blow up story that kind of got everybody talking. But even in Alvin Kamara, as these guys get older, they haven't shown necessarily signs of tapering off just yet, and they're just unique talents. I think if you date it back, a lot of these running backs, by the time they were that age, weren't necessarily these star running backs.
I think there's a few things at play here. I think there's a supply and demand problem, that there's just too many good young running backs and just not enough jobs. It's kind of like kickers a little bit, where there's probably 60, 70 guys walking the earth that could be kickers in the NFL. There's only 32 jobs. And granted, there's a carousel every year, and there's a short leash though, because people know they can go out and replace one of them. So I think that's one issue. The other issue is that you can't pay people for what they've done. You got to pay them for what they're going to do. And unfortunately, 30 is a real number. But I think that the solution to this problem is they need like the Maurice Clarett role, where they allow running backs to come out after their freshman year of college, because what's going on is there's only so much prime there. There is a scientific expiration on their prime. They need to just like lift them out, take those 2 years from college, shift them to the NFL. Then they get to that second contract. Then they get paid commensurate with other players at other positions that aren't taking the brutal beating that these guys take on every single play. And maybe that's a way to offset it. But there does need to be, like, I'm sympathetic to the cause, because these guys do get used and discarded and not paid necessarily what they're worth. But there's also but damn, I hate to feel like the owners are right on this to some degree, where it's just so dangerous to pay guys after a certain point.
Unfortunately, this is the cold, hard reality conversation we're going to be having with Alvin Kamara next. He's going to be the guy next. I mean, the Vikings just did it with Dalvin Cook, who was in his same draft class. He's still having trouble getting that contract. Leonard Fournette was the same draft class too, and he's out there. Ezekiel Elliott, I think, was a year before, still unsigned. I mean, look at the guys that were unsigned, and I don't know how many of them were even 30 yet that the Saints were cycling through last year. Jordan Howard, David Johnson, Mark Ingram has already retired and gone into the TV booth. It's the combination of what happens when they reach a certain age and a certain mileage, and like you said, the supply that keeps coming in. There's a lot of young running backs who do good things in this league.
Another guy whose number might be up soon is Peyton Turner. That gets into our moment presented by New Orleans Hamburger and Seafood Company. Nick, you had Peyton Turner listed as on the fence in your roster locks article. Of course, you can find that on NewOrleans.Football. We talked about Pete Carmichael meeting the moment earlier this week. Can Turner finally meet the moment?
It's going to be tough. And so the story we're referencing is the roster lock. Save 20% on your first payment with the code CAMP23, NewOrleans.Football. It's kind of like a very harsh way to do it. There's multiple categories. There's locks, near locks, on the fence, and long shots. And the locks are just guys where it's like, if someone didn't make the team, like, I wouldn't know how to. I'd be frozen in my chair, unable to tweet, react, think, say anything. Near locks are guys that are almost there. Look, I think Peyton Turner was a healthy scratch in multiple games last year. If there was the end of camp and somehow he didn't make the team, I wouldn't be totally shocked. And I think he kind of does have to fight to prove that he needs to be on the roster. Numbers probably put him in. I'm not betting on him not being on the team, but there is a scenario where maybe he gets squeezed out somehow, some way. And the only guys that I had is locks or near locks, and it was draft status, recent signing in stature. Cam, Nate Shepard, Brian Brzee, Colin Saunders, Carl Granderson, and Foskey are the only ones that I have on there is locks or near locks. And then I do think Peyton Turner's in a distinct tier below all those people. So you're a healthy scratch. You got to find a way to make it in. I don't think your draft status saves you anymore. I think all that is expired. It's do or die time. Show them that you can do something. And if you can't, they just drafted the guy that's here to take your job. So you got to prove it. You got to prove that you need to be on the team. And if numbers are what they are, like, there's a very, very, like, less than 10% chance, but I think he does need to prove that he needs to be on the team.
Yeah, I mean, if there's room for nuance, he's probably, a percentage higher than other on the bubble guys closer to a near lock, but yeah, he's not. He's not. He's got to prove it. It's totally fair. some reasons for optimism. We can't be overly optimistic about Peyton Turner. We just can't be. We've seen enough that we can't be. But if you want to be optimistic about Peyton Turner, I had a conversation with him during OTAs and minicamp, and this is the first time he's been healthy for a long stretch of football since he got hurt during training camp his rookie year. He missed the entire OTAs minicamp, everything last year, recovering from a surgery. This year he did it all. And that's been the biggest thing for him. It's not just health. He's been a healthy scratch, but health is what his biggest thing, he says, is consistency. Not being healthy doesn't allow you to be consistent. He had a stretch from weeks 8 through 11 last year where he finally had a decent stretch going. He had a 2-sack game, 39 snaps at Pittsburgh. And I remember your film review was pretty generous. Some of the things you saw when he was at Pittsburgh. And it's like, he said, his words, I finally started to feel like Peyton Turner. Hurts his ankle the next week against the Rams, misses more time. You can't be consistent if you can't stay healthy. So that doesn't mean he'll never be healthy, but I can't wait to see what he looks like if we get 8 straight weeks of Peyton Turner.
Yeah, I like his tools. It is weird. Like, I like his tools. I like the way he rushes the passer. I think there's a lot of upside there. I think on one of the pods recently, if I'm referencing myself, right, I think I had the stats where he had more pressures per snap. His pressure per snap rate was better than Marcus Davenport's, actually. So maybe there's some upside there, but I'm kind of like at a point with him where it's just kind of, I don't want to be the guy, and I felt like I did this with Davenport too much. So I'm like, I just don't want to be the guy like preaching patience with someone over and over and over and over. Like, just show us, show it consistently.
Patient. You do not have to be patient with him, but it is okay to have to think there's talent there. Yeah.
And I think there is. It's just he's got to show it at this point. Like, I'm just not going to sit here like week after week and be like, well, I think he can. Like, all right, let's see it. And if you do it, cool. Like, but at this point, it's been a while. Yeah. It's been a while. So we need to see something on the field from him. I think the team needs to see it too. I think they're probably at the same point.
The thing that's interesting about Peyton Turner that is I mean, he shouldn't have been drafted in the first round, probably. I think everybody would have a lot more patience, even if he was just drafted 12 picks lower. Isaiah Foskey was picked 40th. I wish Peyton Turner, for his sake, was picked 40th. But it doesn't necessarily mean the Saints were foolish or making up what they saw. I mean, the quotes that are surrounded by him by like teammates like Marcus Davenport last year said, "You guys just haven't seen it with him. I think he's the most talented of all of us." Offensive linemen talk about how slippery he is. He's a guy you can never get your hands on. Like, there are traits that people have seen, but traits is only one part of the equation.
Yeah, and they have referenced it in training camp last year. I think it was David Onyemata who we might have been interviewing, and unfortunately this is a bad comp when you think about how things unfolded for Davenport, but he called Peyton Turner Marcus Davenport 2.0 because of the range and ability and the quickness off the line that we know is in the tank. It's just let the air out of the tire and let's finally see if, number one, no guys can get through these injuries, right? I feel like we sometimes get caught up in the, oh, well, he might not be good. Well, some of it too is he was injured. And so number one, stay healthy, and then 2, put on after that. But I think we do get stuck in the injury talk so often that it almost takes away from the talent the player has, when I don't know if it's nutrition, diet, health. I have no idea. Like,
he said it's been a big focus. Whatever he can do to try to. I mean, and some of it's unavoidable, but
if he became Marcus Davenport at the highest level, it'd be a huge win. If he became Marcus Davenport at the lowest level, it'd be a huge win, because at least Marcus Davenport at the lowest level wasn't a healthy scratch for games, and he was playing and he was usable. Turner he needs to show that he needs to be on the active game day roster at this point. I mean, there is a lot outside of the injuries. Like, when the injuries were aside, like, he still wasn't, granted that sets you back and everything, but like, you got, as a first round pick, you need to be on the field
and Dennis
on the
Allen,
sideline in a uniform. I mean, it's just, he's got to get there.
Dennis Allen doesn't give him a free pass when he talks about him too. It's like, we used to always know how to read Sean Payton code, because we heard it for so many years. Like, if he didn't say he's smart, he had his same stock answer for the guys he liked. But if he threw it, and like, Dennis Allen doesn't try to be like, oh, I think the play, like, he's always like, well, we've got to see it. Like, I mean, those are his answers too. I mean, you can kind of read between the lines that he's not getting a free pass.
You don't have to read between the lines. For all of DA's, like, the things that annoy fans and everything, he tells you exactly what he thinks about a player. He'll never give him false praise. Like, so yeah, I agree 100%. There is a level of frustration, But nobody has to tell you that.
Yeah.
The list of inactives when a healthy player is on there, that tells you you can't say words to take that action away, especially when it happens multiple times.
It kind of gets into the hypotheticals of can you interchange a player for somebody else around the league. It gets into our question of the day presented by Martin Wine and Spirits, home to a wide selection of hand-picked barrel select bourbon, whiskeys, and more. Your Uncle Steve asks, if you had to, I know the awesome
Steve.
Twitter name. I know. If you had to take one player from each NFC South rival and add them to the Saints, who would it be?
This question is the perfect transition because there is no player I'd rather steal from any other NFC South roster than Panthers edge rusher Brian Burns. He would be my choice if I was just picking the best player, especially young player. I mean, obviously there's some older players, especially on Tampa Bay's roster. They're great. But Brian Burns is in his prime. He's an elite edge rusher, and there's no position group I'd rather add to than bringing an elite edge rusher onto the Saints. Just turned 25, 12 and a half sacks last year, 38 sacks in his 4-year career. I think, wasn't there reports that the Rams wanted to trade 2 first-rounders for him last year, and the Panthers wouldn't let him go? I see why. There's nobody I'd rather steal from any NFC South roster than Brian Burns.
All right, who's your Panthers pick?
Well, I mean, I think you got to have the quarterback on the list. You know, you get a number 1 overall pick at QB.
Sure.
I think you go with that. And if you aren't taking Brian Burns, I think J.C. Horn's someone that I would look at is a possibility there too. So those would be my Carolina candidates. If we're moving along, Tampa Bay, man, they're going to hate me for this, but I would take Mike Evans. I think you have to. I think Saints fans are going to, like, when he
that
gets...
will burn the locker room down. Like, I don't even want to say what I think would happen, but my goodness.
I think if they were all on the same team, it'd probably be fine. I think there's a competitive spirit there, and it's just everybody would get over it.
Would be a lot more interesting for one-on-ones.
I'm vetoing your choice because then they don't get to have Marshawn lock down Tampa Bay's number 1 receiver twice a year.
People poo-poo it, but the dude is going to get into the Hall of Fame, and he should. Like, he is one of the best wide receivers in the NFL, and I think if he's on the team, everybody gets along. He's a top-tier talent in the division, no question.
Tampa, I don't know how I feel about where their team is right now, but they definitely have the most. I mean, especially if this is a 1-year question, like going for the Super Bowl this year. I mean, they have Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, and they have Levante David, and they have Devin White, and they have, Antoine Winfield and Vita Vea. But my pick from Tampa Bay, whether it's short term or long term, Tristan Wirfs, and not just because I'm an Iowa Hawkeye homer here, but I mean he's been right up there with Ryan Ramczyk, one of the best right tackles in the league. They're moving him to left tackle. He could play either spot. Go ahead and I've fortified both of my lines, which are the 2 things I would love to see the Saints fortified too.
All right, who's your
Atlanta?
I
think there's 2. I think there's 2 guys. Grady Jarrett's one that I think would be a good fit for this team. Get your team some interior rush, and I think the other one is Kyle Pitts. I think you got to look at him as a game changer, offensive player, tight end that can stretch the field. And if you're talking about guys that, like, I just would want to take off that team for the same, I think he's on that list too. But I'm not going to just keep naming players. There's another one too. I think Drake London's someone.
You can keep going because I think there's a lot of
Kate Ellis. Yeah. I mean, there's a handful of people that I would take off that team.
And we're going to talk more about the NFC South. This is a fascinating roster construction. It's all young players on offense and it's all veterans on defense. And you missed. I have 2 names written down. I thought, if you want to go young, if Kyle Pitts was Kyle Pitts. I mean, I think I've drafted him on half my fantasy teams the last 2 years, and he hasn't delivered yet. But if he was what we thought he was going to be, like a generational talent at tight end, he would absolutely be the pick for the Saints. But, I mean, 2 of their best players that are like veterans have already hit their prime are in the secondary, cornerback A.J. Terrell and safety Jesse Bates, who they just signed from the Bengals. I don't think the Saints need to add to their secondary as much as they need to add to some other positions. But I think those are probably the 2 best players on their team.
I was going to write down Bates, and I was like, a little bit of redundancy there. So I went another spot. But, 100% agree. And, Terrell's been a...
But I want Kyle Pitts. I want to watch Kyle Pitts every day in training camp. We were just talking about Peyton Turner. That's probably what all the Falcons reporters are doing this summer. Like, it's a little different with Pitts. It hasn't been injuries. It's just been like, where is it? Where's the magic? He's supposed to have the magic. Like, I'm probably going to draft him on half my fantasy teams. At least he'll be cheaper this year.
That's more about tight end.
Yeah.
Well,
but that would be huge for the Saints to have a game-changing tight end.
Well, since you guys mentioned J.C. Horn and Kyle Pitts, when we go around the NFC South after this break, we're going to give an update on both of those guys.
Now, at New Orleans Hamburger and Seafood Company, get our $10.99 shrimp remoulade combos with zesty shrimp remoulade and fried shrimp or catfish for only $10.99. And did you hear? Soft-shelled crabs are back at New Orleans Hamburger and Seafood Company.
Life is full of unexpected events, which can come with unplanned expenses. Jefferson Financial Federal Credit Union has a variety of personal loan products to meet your needs. Whether it's treating yourself to something new, paying off an unexpected expense, or consolidating debt, we are here to help. With rates as low as 8.5% APR, a personal loan with Jefferson Financial can help. Don't let life's curveball impact your financial happiness. Apply today at jeffersonfinancial.org. Membership restrictions apply. Federally insured by NCUA.
Martin Wine and Spirits is home to a selection of hand-picked barrel select bourbon, whiskeys, and much, much more. They are family owned and operated since 1946 and specialize in wine, spirits, gourmet food, gift baskets, catering, and tasting events. They have many locations, so they're never too far away. You can check them out in Metairie, New Orleans, Mandeville, and Baton Rouge, or if it's more convenient, you can always shop online. Whether you're a wine novice or a seasoned collector, you'll enjoy the Martin Wine and Spirit experience.
All right, let's go around the NFC South. What has everybody been up to this offseason when it comes to OTAs and minicamp? We're going to start with the Panthers and this quote from Andy Dalton, which I know all Saints fans love to hear quotes from him. Why not? So he views himself still as an NFL starter. He said, quote, "I don't think there are 32 guys better than me. As soon as I don't think I'm one of the best 32 or a little lower, I'll be watching football on TV."
We can relitigate this again. We can get back into where would I have ranked Andy Dalton on my Saints
30.
top 20 if they had kept him as a. He's probably around 32. I mean,
Okay.
I think him and Jameis Winston both. There's probably some starters that they're in that same range, but it doesn't matter because he's already been replaced in Carolina. Like I think they started him with the ones in the first week of OTAs, but I think it was week 2 or week 3.
Yeah,
they're not hiding what they're doing there. Bryce Young is already taken over as the number 1, and he's already back to being the backup, barring any injuries there.
What's interesting to me is remember when Andy Dalton got here and how willing he was to help Jameis Winston? There was no quotes like this.
Yeah.
Why is this quote coming out with a rookie?
Look, here's the thing. Like, you guys ever play Monopoly?
Of course.
You get the community chest or the chance, and you get the card, and you win second prize in the beauty contest, and you get $10. Like I view myself as the winner, but like the card is telling me what I am, and like the cards are telling Andy Dalton that he's not a starting NFL quarterback anymore. So he can view himself however he wants, but reality is reality, and you're second place, man. Like that's just kind of is what it is. I get it. He's fighting. He wants to be the starter. He went into a situation where it was undefined. He was there before the other guy, so he probably feels a little bit more ownership over that situation. Whereas here, he was coming in and he was told he was behind Jameis. But Andy Dalton wasn't ever thinking he was second fiddle. He was trying to be first fiddle. So it is what it is. But Andy Dalton's Andy Dalton. He's a backup quarterback.
If if he was the starter in San Francisco this year, I would think he could lead them to the playoffs. You get him in the right situation or whatever. I always said if he was, what Teddy Bridgewater did for 5 games while Drew Brees was out when the Saints had that absolutely loaded roster that year, maybe he could have gone 5-0 instead of Teddy Bridgewater. But those guys are all in a certain category. Teddy Bridgewater doesn't have a starting job either right now. So
I think that's fair. All right, we promised JC Horn update. So he missed minicamp and some OTAs because of a foot and ankle injury, but he will be a full go for training camp. Is this somebody too? I mean, I know Joe Horn and the ties the Saints have to just that family. JC Horn, does it seem like he's primed to have a full season?
Yeah, I mean, it would be great for the Saints if he doesn't. Like they play him early in the season, but it seems like he's going to be all right. He's someone that I'm always going to pay attention to because the Saints wanted him on their team, and there's just like this whole alternate universe of like what actually happens with Marshawn's contract if they get him. But look, I think he's an ascending talent. He's building block on that team. I like a lot of and nobody was higher on the Panthers construction than I think Mike. Like it's just kind of, you have these dualities of the Saints trying to stay on one path, the Panthers kind of pulling back and going another way. Like who's going to get there first, who's going to last longer. I think it's going to be an interesting comparison over the next 5-6 years.
I like their roster construction in that. We're going to talk about this team in a minute. I hate what Tampa Bay is doing right now. Tampa Bay's in limbo. You can't be in limbo. You got to do what the Saints are doing and saying we've got too much talent to rebuild, or you've got to rebuild the way I think the Panthers did, which is Christian McCaffrey has value. Let's trade him. DJ Moore has value. Let's trade him. Let's go get the number one quarterback in the draft and not just a rookie quarterback. So that's what I like about what they did. J.C. Horn is so interesting, though, because not only did the Saints kind of view we want to move up in the draft, like 20-some spots that year to get either J.C. Horn or Patrick Surtain, all draft evaluators and teams kind of, I think those guys went back to back or maybe two spots apart in the top 10. Patrick Surtain is already established. Some people are saying, is he like the number one cornerback in the league already? Everyone's talking about him as a top 3 or 4 cornerback in the league. And that was where Horn was supposed to be before injuries stunned it. So, I mean, it's not out of the question that by the end of his first contract in Carolina, he's thought of as a top 5-6 cornerback in the NFL. And that'll help Carolina come along a lot faster if he's an alpha.
A couple other injury updates with the Panthers. Hayden Hurst is returning from a groin injury. Offensive guard, Austin Corbett is recovering from an ACL tear from their season finale. And then Dante Jackson looks like he's going to be out for the season with an Achilles injury. And they've got a new head coach. Like, it just seems like hopefully the Saints are not in this situation. Like a lot, we've been mentioning a lot of these injuries, but it seems like as much upside the Panthers do have with a lot of new players, there are still some pretty significant injuries, and you have a new head coach. How does it work?
It's going to be interesting. Yeah. Week 2, you got some stuff lingering. You know, it could play to the Saints' benefit a little bit.
Everything I read about Bryce Young, he just wowed in OTAs and minicamp, and I think that was probably expected. He was not going to be somebody that came in and didn't impress overall. So that kind of wraps up the Panthers. Let's go over to the Bucs. New system in Tampa Bay. All three of us were talking about their new offensive coordinator. We don't really know much about him. Dave Canales, hopefully we pronounced that correctly, but we really don't know what this Bucs offense is going to look like.
We don't know who's going to lead it.
I know.
I don't know what it's going to look like. It's probably going to look poor. I mean, you go from Tom Brady to Baker Mayfield. I don't see a lot of upside here. If they go to their, I don't think they want Baker starting every game, but he probably will or might. So
I bet I'll take the over on whatever Kyle Trask. I mean, I bet they switch back and forth a couple times.
Everything I've read is that they're both kind of right there competing
because neither one is going to obviously win it, I think. Yeah.
I think you got a lot of people clinging to jobs in that situation too. So like what gets them there does pulling back give you more longevity. That there's a lot of factors at play here. Like deliberately losing might cost some people jobs. So I don't know what's going to, I just think I agree with what you said in the Panthers answer about them is just they're kind of like,
I don't get it. I don't get it. Like I read that they were going to try to do what we've talked about the Saints doing for years and eat. They got themselves in salary cap jail after COVID. The cap went down, but they won the Super Bowl and they just kept borrowing against the future borrowing. So the point was they were going to try to catch up on the cap this year, but they re-signed Levante David. They keep Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, guys they could trade for first-round picks or whatever. They have no answer at quarterback. Are they going to try to win 6 or 7 games, still have no answer at quarterback? These guys get a year older. I don't know where this team is. They're not going all in to win like the Saints are with their older veterans, and they're not rebuilding like the Falcons and the Panthers are. They feel like a team. I mean, they'll probably. That doesn't mean they can't beat the Saints on a given day. There's still a lot of talent on this roster. But I don't understand their like long-term thinking. They're feeling like they're willing to sacrifice this season. To what end, though? Is this team set up to be better next season? I don't get it.
Yeah, I mean, like the difference between them and the Saints, and you can disagree with the philosophy in both cases. And I think going back even to last year, like the draft day trade, or not draft day trade, but the trade for the additional draft pick, it was like, man, they got a direction. They're trying to build around these guys. They're going in on it. Now, looking back at that, or even at the time, the criticism of it's fair. You might have disagreed with it, but at least there was a full throttled approach in one direction. And it wasn't kind of like, the half measure. I don't know what they're doing. I don't get it.
I know.
Yeah, some other news, the Devin White trade rumors were out there, but he kind of quieted that when he did report to minicamp. And then Antoine Winfield is moving back to free safety. Do you have any thoughts on that?
They're going to have to stop teams from scoring. So get your best players at safety. They're going to need a really good defense to offset that offense. So whatever puts them in the best situation, God bless them, and hopefully it works out for them.
And actually, Kyle Pitts put out a video on his Instagram, and I know we make a lot of that kind of stuff with Michael Thomas and Alvin Kamara, as we've seen in years past, but it looks like Kyle Pitts is on track for a full return this season, which is going to be huge for the Falcons.
Yeah. The Falcons fascinate me a little bit. I'm not going to pick them first or probably even second in this division. Maybe not even. I don't know where to pick them because Desmond Ridder is their quarterback, and he's probably the biggest question mark of all these quarterbacks. But you got to love the offensive talent they brought in recent drafts. Pitts, Drake London, Bijan Robinson now. And then they went all in on defense this year to apparently be competitive right away. Maybe they recognize what's going on in the NFC South. They caught up on their salary cap. So they added Jesse Bates, was one of the prizes of free agency. Calais Campbell, an older guy, didn't cost that much. Traded for Jeff Okudah, added Bud Dupree, pilfered the Saints for David Onyemata and Caden Ellis, and obviously their defensive coordinator, Ryan Nielsen. They still have A.J. Terrell. They still have Grady Jarrett. That's a very competitive defense. They need these young players to come along. They need Kyle Pitts to be Kyle Pitts. They're maybe the most interesting team in this division, but I don't, quarterback is everything, and Desmond Ridder is still the biggest question mark of every quarterback in the division.
We'll see how this style holds up at the end of the year. My only thing with them is I felt like maybe I would have just existed where I existed for one more year and not necessarily gotten really old on defense.
Yeah.
It doesn't really necessarily fit with the timeline, but if they end up being a good team, like, so be it. But I still feel like they're a quarterback away, and maybe like not trying to be like a mediocre team would have benefited them more a little bit long term. But I also think there's a lot of pressure on everybody there to win games and turn it around and show you got a direction. So you don't want to necessarily stock the cupboard with all these players on offense that you talked about, and then somebody else comes in and reaps the benefits. So that's, just the reality of the league in some respects. There aren't a lot of places where you have patience like the Saints have here. You do have to show results kind of immediately, and they're kind of at that point.
You're exactly right. Well, Terry Fontenot, the Saints' former pro personnel director, is in his third year as GM there with Arthur Smith as his third year as coach, and you don't get 4-year rebuilding plans. So it is time to produce something.
Yeah, and just one last note on the Falcons. Avery Williams, one of their punt returners, he is out for the year. He had a non-contact injury during June open practice.
That's exactly what you don't want to have happen.
No, not at all. Not ideal, but we get into our Ideal Market segment presented by Ideal Market. How does the NFC South shake out this year? Rank the order in which teams will finish. Who's the ideal NFC South champ?
That was an ideal transition to the ideal segment. So that was couldn't have set that up better. That was really good. I think the ideal shakeout is put the Saints at the top. I think that's what everybody listening to this wants. That's what I want because it makes our job more fun. Yeah, I do. I do believe it. I do think that they're the best team in the division. I think if they don't win it, I would say that's unideal and a disappointment even. I think every expectation should be that, and anything short of it, I feel like is, context matters, but without disaster striking, I think it would be kind of a failure of their plan and direction.
They're the one team of these four that it is deemed an utter failure if they don't win the division.
Getting Derek Carr says winning the South or bust, and it should be. That should be the expectation. So they need to hit that. And the timeline of their team, too, there isn't a lot of – they need to be good now or the end of these careers. The 2017 draft class, the longevity of that becomes, within put in question. So, yeah, they have to win the South. They have to. So the order of the teams, Carolina second, Atlanta third, Tampa fourth.
Yeah.
That's probably been my prediction. I think Tampa Bay is going to be a pesky team that'll compete just because of how many talented players they have. Carolina, I feel like Carolina and Atlanta will get better as the season goes along. Ideally, though, from a Saints standpoint, don't let Carolina come together quickly. I think they're the looming threat in the division that if it happens fast for that team and it doesn't look like it's going to take a couple of years, that would spell the most danger for the Saints.
Let me walk this back. I mean, we're talking ideal, not actually what's going to happen. The ideal outcome is that Carolina's bad and Bryce Young isn't a guy that's going to be a problem in the division for forever. And
but I think we all know he will be.
Well, hopefully he isn't. Some of these guys do bust, but yeah, I mean, ideally for the Saints, that's what they want. They want Bryce Young to not be good.
Look at the Alabama track record, Tua and Jalen. When's the last time? It's been a long time. There have been some busts coming out of Alabama, but as of late, I guess you could mention Mac Jones in Boston or in Patriots.
Foxborough.
Yeah, Foxborough. But we'll see how it all shakes out. I don't think Bryce Young is going to be a bust, though.
No, look, a lot of scouts I talked to were like they were making like Drew Brees comparisons to him and everything. So I think There's the but look, but there's been a lot of number one picks who haven't hit,
Right.
and there's multiple.
He just can't hit. He just can't hit in September yet. At least,
Yeah.
at least make him need some development.
Well, the Saints have been kind of getting stiffed as of late on social media, and another one hit. This is our money segment presented by Jefferson Financial Federal Credit Union. Saints only had 3 players voted in the top 10 of their position groups in an ESPN survey. In 2020, they had 9.
Yeah.
Are we concerned there's a lack of elite level of play right now with this current roster?
Nick just hit on this. It's why the Saints' timetable is win now timetable. This has been sort of my biggest concern with the team dating back to last year is they used to have the most players on those lists. I mean, they had one in every position group. They would do a top 100 list, and the Saints would have 7 or 8 players on the top 100 players in the league. And a lot of them are reaching the end of their window. Cam Jordan, Demario Davis. Injuries have affected Ryan Ramczyk and Michael Thomas, Alvin Kamara. We've talked about running backs having a shorter shelf life. And they haven't restocked the cupboard with another 2017 level draft class. So I think you do need elites. I think, Derek Carr could potentially become near elite at quarterback. Marshawn Lattimore's still elite. But they need a younger generation of these guys to emerge because a lot of those guys are, they can still be elite this year, but this isn't a long-term plan unless they find new guys to replenish it.
The 3 were Eric McCoy.
No, McCoy wasn't on it. He was like the first honorable mention. I think Kamara made it, and Marshawn was obviously on it, and Cam Jordan still made it. Or no, Cam Jordan was also an honorable mention. Demario Davis.
Yeah, so look, I do think one of the things, though, when you're winning 10, 11 games, like your Cam Jordans get on there, your McCoys get on there, Ramczyk probably sneaks on there at 10.
And this is top 10.
Yeah.
Not number 1 overall.
Chris Olave, maybe, I think he wasn't even honorable mention. He's probably honorable mention at least or on the list if they're winning a handful of games. Derek Carr, I saw was honorable mention. Yeah. If they make the playoffs and win a game or two, maybe Derek Carr sneaks on 8th, 9th, 10th. So I think there's some hype behind it, but their roster was a 7-win team. I mean, so 7-win teams don't have a lot of top 10 players, just factually speaking. So yeah, things got to come together. They got to be healthy. Players play better. I think Tyron could probably get on a list if they win enough games. There's a couple more plays.
He was still in the top 10 in the Madden ratings. Tyron was.
So there's a handful of like height-based elements to this where I think team success elevates players. So I don't think they're like devoid of talent overall, but I think it's probably pretty fair that the guys that made these lists probably the ones that should have, and the ones who didn't, I'm not up in arms over it. Yeah. I think it's probably pretty fair.
Well, do the Saints have any players that you would rank number 1 overall in their position group? And it's okay to say no too, because I think overall this is going to be a really tough question to answer. There's
only one guy that's even in that conversation. It's Marshawn, and if you put him number 1 cornerback, number 6, like we talked about this recently. He's someone that I think is in the conversation of being the best at his position, but
we're not there yet.
Yeah. I could be there this season. He makes a handful of plays.
This season, but standing right now, no.
You theoretically could say
Ryan
Ramczyk could reestablish himself as the first team All-Pro right tackle. If you're not saying all offensive tackles, you're saying right tackles. You had him number 2 on your list, and it's only it's 2 things that have held him back. One is injuries, but we had the great conversation with Teron Armstead earlier this week where you were talking about when you have a reliable quarterback who gets to the same spot on every down, then the right tackle doing his job the same way on every down gets a lot more credit for what he's doing. So he's another guy who could be there. We've had differing views on whether the clock is ticking on Demario Davis, but because of the respect he's earned and just like the variety of high profile numbers he puts up, he could have one more All-Pro year left in his tank. But Olave is another guy who I wouldn't be surprised if he could enter a top 5 in a receiver list by as early as next year, depending on how he flashes this season.
I'm still hung up on our previous segment. I cannot believe the quarterback factory Alabama is. You have 4 quarterbacks right now that are 4 clear-cut starters in the NFL. That's pretty impressive. Jalen Hurts, Tua, Mac Jones.
People don't want to hear about Alabama.
I know. I'm
show.
Just saying. But when you think about it in that aspect, I know we're in Louisiana. But
Mac Jones, if Mac Jones doesn't have a good season, he's going to get Bill Belichick fired. So I don't know. I don't know if he's a clear cut. He's someone that could be on his way out
right now. But coming right out of Alabama. So interesting. Well, we'll see. We'll see if these quarterbacks can withstand the test of time. We'll see if Bryce Young is going to break out early rather than later. The Saints would prefer it to be later, but thanks for joining us on another episode of NewOrleans.Football. We'll see you next time.
Go Tigers.